Hi guys, welcome to today's MCAT question of the day. As always, we'll be working our way through one of the many MCAT practice problems found at MCATselfprep.com, home of the free MCAT prep course. I'm Garrett Bourne, a 97th percentile MCAT tutor, and I'll be walking you through today's lesson as if you were one of my very own private tutoring students. Now, today's question of the day comes from the end of lesson mastery quiz found in lesson 7 of the Biochemistry 1 module. So be sure to hit pause and try this problem for yourself before watching my explanation. To get started, let's go over this question together. So it's question 8, and it says, scientists are creating a database to store cDNA synthesized from mRNA via reverse transcriptase. The end result of the latest sample was a single-stranded DNA molecule, indicating the absence of which of the following. So in order to answer this question correctly, it's important that we have a solid understanding of the process of cDNA synthesis from mRNA. All right, so now for our explanation of how cDNA is synthesized from mRNA. And as you can see, it's of course going to start with our single-stranded mRNA molecule with its poly-A tail. And it's important to note that there's a poly-A tail because that will be the first step in synthesizing cDNA, which is adding an oligo-DT primer. And what's important about adding this primer, as we can see here, is that the thymine and the adenine, of course, will bind to each other and allow a great starting point to add our next step, which is adding our enzyme reverse transcriptase. Now, this is great because reverse transcriptase can then run along the mRNA and read it and then reverse transcribe that mRNA code into a cDNA strand. Now, what's important to note here, and if you remember from the question stem, is at this point we have a single strand of cDNA with a subsequent mRNA strand. While that's great, the real end process that we want to get here is a double-strand molecule of cDNA. So in order to do that, we need to get rid of this mRNA strand that's in the way. Now, one of the ways that we can effectively do that is by adding another enzyme called RNase H. This will run along the mRNA molecule and chew it up and basically leave kind of some nicked strands of this mRNA remaining. Now, what we do here is add another enzyme, DNA polymerase 1. Now, what this will do is it will, again, run along this single strand of cDNA and kind of fill in the gaps of this nicked RNA and put a little bit of double-stranded cDNA. However, that's actually not the only role that this DNA polymerase has. It also has some exonuclease activity. So at the same time that it's running along this cDNA and transcribing a second complementary strand, a double strand of the cDNA molecule, it's also eating up the mRNA and replacing it with the second strand of cDNA as well, as you can see here. Now we've got our cDNA molecule, and we've got a second complementary strand of cDNA as well. But as you can see, there are some gaps. It's not perfectly ligated. So what do we do to fix that? Add another enzyme, DNA ligase. It will run along the strand here and fix those gaps, seal them up together, and then boom, we now have our perfectly complementary double-stranded cDNA. Now, before we look at these answer choices, let's remember our explanation before, that apparently these scientists were doing the process and they were left with a single strand of cDNA. Now, thinking back again to that explanation, that occurred after we added reverse transcriptase, which coded the mRNA into that single strand of cDNA. So let's look at these, thinking about that, let's look at these answer choices together. So first, we've got transcriptase. If we think back on it, transcriptase was actually not involved in this process. That would be possibly an enzyme going from DNA to RNA, which was the opposite of what we were doing here. So we can get rid of that as kind of a distractor. Then we've got DNA helicase. Again, that's an enzyme that helps unwind DNA to replicate it. It wasn't critically implicated in this process of going back from mRNA to cDNA, so we can get rid of that. Now we're left with these two, reverse transcriptase and DNA polymerase. Both of these are involved in the process of going from mRNA to cDNA, but which one is involved in, or I guess the absence of which one of these would leave us with a single strand. Now again, we know, we've talked about, that reverse transcriptase is what actually creates that single strand. So that couldn't have been absent. We can get rid of that because that's what allowed it to make that single strand in the first place. That leaves us, of course, obviously we can see here with only one option, which is DNA polymerase. Now, what these scientists should have continued to do was add DNA polymerase to that single strand, and that would have gotten rid of the mRNA and synthesized a second strand, leaving him with double-stranded cDNA molecule, and that is our correct answer. Now, if you enjoyed this MCAT question of the day, be sure to give it a like. For more MCAT questions of the day, be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel and enroll in our free MCAT prep course found at MCATselfprep.com. If you are really looking to maximize your score, be sure to check out our elite tutoring services and request a free consultation with any of our available tutors. We'd love to chat with you about your situation and how you can maximize your MCAT score. We'll look forward to hearing from you soon, and we'll see you next time.